For those of you who are counting, there are 184 days till Christmas. Or another way we could say exactly 6 months from today is Christmas Eve. I love the way the liturgy does this. So here in the high days of summer, we are looking forward to the winter time, to the birth of the Christ. In the Gospel of John, we read from Luke today, but in the Gospel of John, when Jesus first appears, John the Baptist speaks the line we say at Mass just before communion, "Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world." And then later in chapter 3 of John's Gospel, when the people question whether John is the Messiah, he responds by stating, "He must increase, but I must decrease." Because we celebrate the birth of John the Baptist at the time of the summer solstice, from now until we reach the winter solstice, 184 days from now, when we celebrate the birth of Jesus, the days will be getting shorter, John is decreasing, and Christ is increasing. John prefigures Jesus in more than just his birth. The Baptist is martyred apparently early in Jesus' public ministry. The beheading of John the Baptist is remembered on August the 29th, 2 weeks and 1 day before the feast of the triumph of the cross, celebrated on September 14th. But what I find most interesting about John the Baptist is that although he is sent to prepare the way, he himself never becomes a follower of Jesus. He's a transition figure. He's the last of the Old Testament prophets pointing the way to the one who comes. John's name means God has shown mercy. But it is the Christ, not the Baptist, who is the human face of the Father's mercy. Later today, about 12:30, we're going to celebrate baptism, and the families will gather at the door of the church, as we always do when we gather for baptism. The babies will be in the arms of their mother or father, and we'll ask this question: what name have you given to your child? Now, of course, the name is already picked before they arrive in church, usually some family name, maybe they're named after one of the parents. When Jesus came up out of the water of the Jordan, the voice of God spoke over the waters, identifying Jesus by a new name. "You are my Son, the Beloved. With you I'm well pleased." In today's story from the Gospel of Luke, the child that was promised by the angel Gabriel is given a new name, but it's not the name chosen by the family. In fact, it's the name God has given, the name that angel Gabriel announced before the child was born. Zechariah, an old man, Elizabeth beyond childbearing years, was in the temple when suddenly Gabriel appeared to him and said that Elizabeth was to bear a son. Zechariah couldn't believe it. After all these years, after we had given up even praying that prayer, God now remembers? We do not hear God speak to us because, like Zechariah, we too honestly do not believe that God has chosen to enter our lives, to claim us as God's own. God is much too distant for that. We can't imagine a God who is the center, who knows no division, who is as immediately present, as immediately God to one as to all. So the problem is that we actually think the world has two centers, God and ourselves. We presume then that God is so busy at one end of the world that we would best manage our own end for ourselves. We do not understand that the world has one center. We must drown in God, be baptized into God. And so Zechariah was struck mute, perhaps deaf as well, because they had to motion for him. He was plunged into silence, forced to enter into the wilderness in order to hear God in the silence of his heart. This is always the way. We must decrease, he must increase. The alcoholic recovery community has a wonderful expression for this. The word ego is an acronym, E-G-O, easing God out. We must let go of our expectations in order to receive the promise. John the Baptist grew and became strong in spirit in the wilderness. After his baptism in the River Jordan, Jesus was driven by the Spirit into the wilderness. The wilderness is the place of transformation, where we learn to let go and let God. When Elizabeth announces that the child will be named John, the relatives complain, if you name him John, he's not going to be like us. He's going to be something different from what we expect. But Elizabeth stands her ground. So they make signs to Zechariah, who calls for the writing tablet and writes, his name is John. Zechariah is finally ready to accept this child on God's terms, even though he might have preferred someone else. The psalm that we sang today as a response psalm is a sign for this feast, Psalm 139. The psalmist is inviting us to prepare to receive the gift of God's favor. Like St. Augustine, God is within us, but we seek God outside. God is really closer to us than we are to ourselves. Let's sing 2 verses of this psalm.